a couple things I want to clarify, or try to clarify from yesterday. Hi, Liz. In speaking about the in speaking about the difference between what we're doing here and the ancient wisdom teachings, I want to be really clear about something, and that is that it's not that I think there's anything wrong with the ancient wisdom teachings. It's not that I don't see their power and their beauty and the mystery behind them and all of that. It's just that if you think that what we're doing here, if you were to think that this was a version of, I don't know, say physics, you would find it impossible to actually get the fruits of what we're doing here, because you'd be in the wrong paradigm. Similarly, if you thought that it had to do with history, you would have difficulty getting the fruits of what's here because you'd be in the wrong paradigm. And it's the same thing with the ancient wisdom teachings. If you think that this is a version of the ancient wisdom teachings, then you're going to be in the wrong paradigm. You're going to have a great deal of difficulty actually hearing so that you can, decide for yourself the merit and value of it on its own merits, rather than as a version of something else which it is not. I have to say that I think that what we are about here, and I'm not talking about me as some special character or anything like that, but what this entire community, which consists in this group here and all the people all over the world who have come forward especially during the last year, to take part in this, what we're about, I actually think, is what all the ancient wisdom teachings were trying to get to. I think of this as a fulfillment, not a competition, not a contention. When I talked about Ramana and Papaji and the Krishna devotion that Papaji lost, I want to point out that Ramana, when telling Papaji that that's what got him here, and now you just can forget about Krishna devotion, he didn't disparage Krishna devotion. He didn't say that that was a wrong thing to do. He just said that was over for Papaji, because he was somewhere else, some new realization. When I am speaking about the looking, and I encourage you to look at you, which I do all the time. I use that pronoun quite often. You, look at you. I want to be really clear that what I see as you see as me. So what I want you to look at is me. Not this me, but that me. And it's really important to be clear on that. There's no separate entity there apart from what is the case all the time. It's me that I want you to look at. And by the way, recently an insight came to me that was kind of cool, which is that it's not uncommon for people to say, for example, I could say, I'm just like you. And for people to say that as an indication of the commonality of their existence and so forth. I'm just like you. But it's much more powerful to see that all of you are just like me. It's much more powerful for you to see that all of us are just like you, because that's the case. Now I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm not going to talk for very long, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the actual way in which the effects of the looking unfold, and about the recovery process and so forth and so on. If there's some question that comes up that really is that really seems critical to you while I'm talking about these things, raise your hand, and we'll see if I can't stop what I'm saying and deal with what it is that's troubling you about what I'm saying, or what you didn't hear, or something like that. It's become clear to me, this retreat is much different than the retreats in the past. The retreats in the past were kind of based in my determination to learn how to speak about this clearly and directly in a way that isn't encumbered by other understandings and so forth. This retreat is not like that, and as a result, the dynamics of it feel different than the retreats in the past have. The retreats in the past have been, like normal spiritual retreats or whatever retreats, where I talk for a while and then invite you to come up and ask questions and so forth. And this model just doesn't quite work here now. It's a different situation, different circumstance. We're in this together. Truly, we're in this together. So we are going to try to understand a better dynamic for the way in which we operate in this retreat. All of us together, including all of you. And we're not going to get real crazy about it, but one thing that insight has led to is that it's not necessary for you to just be quiet if something's really bothering you and you don't understand something, that this is a conversation. And it is possible for me to be able to speak with you in the middle of what I'm saying. This isn't a sermon. This isn't doctrine. It's not dogma. It's a human activity. So, at any time, if you feel like there's something you'd like to say about what I'm saying, something consistent with in context with the discussion, then raise your hand and I'll see if I can do something about having a little conversation with you at that time. Okay?
When you said me, do you mean the me that you talked about, the me that was the not of the personality, that you're not talking about that?
Just a second, Rose. I'm sorry. I was speaking to, I don't know your name. Diva. Eva. And you can come all the way up here if you want to, or you can just stand at that microphone. It's up to you.
Carla was very gracious in putting this microphone here for me. Because I probably would never come to sit in front of the camera right there. So since it's here.
Well, then this is a good thing that we've done.
Yeah. This is the first experience I have with you. I came with my boyfriend, Rick. My experience is with the, as you call them, ancient wisdom teachings. I do a lot of yoga and stuff like that. So I have experience with, and you said that you feel as though maybe they're working towards getting you to the same goal, as you are working towards.
I don't think I said that, but it might be close enough.
Similar.
What I said was that this is what they're trying to get to.
Yeah. I was talking with one of the other gals in the class last night about, that I feel like we're all on the path toward that goal, if you're going to say goal.
It is a goal.
Right.
The goal is to be finished with the misery of being human.
Yeah. When you say for me to look at me, it leaves me feeling like I don't have any place to look. It leaves my mind wandering. I don't know what to rest it on. And that leaves me frustrated almost upset, as you can see.
Well, actually, the fact that you can't find any place to rest it on is a sign that you're on the right track.
I heard you saying that before, yeah, but it still doesn't feel any better.
No, it's not going to feel any better immediately. What we're doing goes against the grain. Really completely goes against the grain. We have in all of our lives, we've come to some reconciliation with the difficulties and the unpredictability and the things that feel bad and the things that don't quite work, and reconciliation with the fact that the things that I try to do to fix it, well, they're okay, but they still, the underlying murmur of discontent remains. That's true of the ancient wisdom teachings. In some cases, the ancient wisdom teachings provide us with some therapeutic practices that can make us feel really good for a short period of time, but then they go away and leave us back where we were.
Well, I don't know that I necessarily agree with that they leave you back where you were. I mean, I'm nowhere near where I was 5 years ago. I would have never even understood the teachings that you have now had I not had the experience that I've had.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they don't, when I say they leave you back where you were, actually until you leave them, they don't leave you back where you were. You're still following that path and that which provides some understandings and some respite and some, like rest from the natural kind of discontent that humans have with their own lives. Now, I'm not saying that they don't do that. As long as you're with them, they're not going to leave you back where you were. But they're not going to take away the fact that when the therapeutic measures and the understandings become a part of the fabric of your relationship with life, the relationship with life remains the same. There's still something wrong that has to be fixed. Still something that I haven't quite got to that I need to get to.
True.
Right.
There may be, a whole nother realm of where I can go.
Right.
In order
but there's
to be.
Not. That's what I'm saying. That's my claim. There's not. The realm that provides total satisfaction and fulfillment is the realm of ordinary human consciousness, freed from the fear of life. That's the realm.
And if I can't grasp that, what do I do in the meanwhile?
Well, you don't have to grasp it.
But I feel like I need to.
Well, I know you do, but that's okay. The feeling that you do is not a problem. I mean, it feels like a problem, but it's not. What I'm saying and what I claim is that if you will do what I ask, and you have, obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be so, I recognize that very clearly. If you do what I ask, in the end, you will find yourself at home in your own life, sane, safe, secure, satisfied, and fulfilled. Now, the way in which that plays out is idiosyncratic. That's what I'm going to talk about this morning a little bit, about the way that actually takes place, what actually happens to make that be the case. But this doesn't take you to some realm that gets you out of the human realm. It doesn't. It goes against the grain. What we see to be the case is that the realm of ordinary human consciousness, unaltered, unmagnified, unchanged in any way, the realm of ordinary human consciousness and ordinary human life, the experience of ordinary human life, is actually what we've always wanted. We think it's not that because of the fact that we are standing in a relationship with life that automatically assumes that there's something wrong, that there's something that needs to be gotten, that there's something that needs to be gotten rid of. Now, no amount of understanding will settle this for you. And your attempts to understand it won't actually lead anywhere except into confusion, but that's okay. I mean, really, that's okay. Confusion's not the problem. Okay? None of the psychological effects of anything is the problem. The psychological effects are the psychological effects. Over time, they disappear, leaving you safe and sane and satisfied in your own life.
So are you saying that, because to me, if I'm looking inward and I'm focusing on my breath, it's comfortable and comforting to me.
Yes, it is.
But if I'm looking inward and trying to find myself, it's anxiety provoking.
Yes, that's
right. Do it
right.
anyway?
Do it anyway.
Do it anyway.
I don't think you'll be able to stop doing it now. But I mean, really, I'm saying that. But yes, do it anyway. The anxiety is a confirming sign.
Mm-hmm. And
it's a sign that you're on the right track.
And for as long as I need the antibiotics, as you said, antibiotics yesterday, it's like
for as long as you need
because
the
you said I don't
antibiotics?
have to do it forever. I should only do it for as long as I need the medicine, right?
Right. And what will happen when you no longer need the medicine is that you will naturally just stop the as I was talking to somebody yesterday, the impulse to make of this a discrete and concrete act will pass away from you naturally.
I don't know. I hate to say that when I walk away from here, I probably can't see myself doing something that's going to provoke as much anxiety in me as it does.
Well,
I might go back to, resting my focus on my breath. I don't know. You say that you think that I won't be able to stop, but the amount of anxiety it creates for me, I avoid
well, you keep,
at all costs.
Oh, I know. See, and that's it, right? That's the problem. That's the problem with human life. There's a background of anxiety that's ever present. And what's happening when you take this act, when you make this action, this direct movement of trying to bring attention to you, is that triggers the anxiety. You're doing something wrong.
So in triggering the anxiety and getting used to it just right here and figuring out how to deal with it in my own self, that's what creates my ability to be okay with life?
No. No. See,
okay,
that's
I'm still not getting
see,
it. Then.
This is but that's okay. Really, don't worry about that.
Okay.
That's my job, is to try to clarify this for you. You see, but I want you to see something about this, and that is that from my point of view, and I have a lot of support for this point of view. It's not just an idea that it's come into my head. It's something that a lot of people are doing. And from my point of view, it doesn't matter whether I ever say another word to you to try to ease your anxiety or to give you some foundation of understanding that might make it possible for you to navigate this process more comfortably. From my point of view, I don't have to say another word to you.
Well, of course not.
Everything I've said already is enough. But I also am very much interested actually in helping people have as comfortable a transition as possible by speaking about what I see to be how this thing works, what the actual process is that is taking place, and how in the end it leaves us grounded in our own lives. So I don't have any problem with talking about these things. I'm happy to talk to you about it. But I'll tell you something. I'll tell you that anxiety is a really good sign. It really is. Not everybody gets that.
Well, you didn't, right? I mean, you said
Oh,
that you
I did.
didn't
I
even
had terror.
realize. Well,
No, I had terror. I had huge terror.
I thought you said that when you first looked inward, you didn't even realize you had done it. I mean, it was years
That's
later
right.
that you looked back and said,
That's
oh,
right.
That's when it was.
That's right.
Well, if you didn't know.
But what followed was terror. You don't know that you've already done it. You don't know that the end is certain. You think that this anxiety means that you're on the wrong track. And if it was real existential terror that struck you, you would be convinced that we were on the wrong track. So, yes, it's true that I didn't know it when it happened, but I tell you that what followed upon that was deep, existential, profound terror that I had done something really wrong, that I had turned my back on everything that provided any hope for even being able to live, like reasonably well. So I'm familiar with that. Anxiety is a good sign. It really is. You're going against the grain. And you got to go against the grain. The grain isn't taking us anywhere but to the grave. Whining and crying all the way. Oh my God, when am I going to get better? When am I going to get enlightened? When am I going to get realized? When will this stupidity go? When will everything clear up and I never have to worry about it again? That's what the grain does for us. It gets us through the day in misery and discontent, with total disaffection with our own lives.
Well, I thought that's what I had changed when I started going to the yoga retreats that I've been going to,
And I'll tell you something else.
Rick tells me, no, you got it all wrong.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, that's not all wrong. I mean, like yoga in particular can be very therapeutic. Okay? And there's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to abandon therapeutic measures. You don't have to abandon anything. You can continue on a path seeking enlightenment and self-realization, and it won't stop the progress of this. It's not like...
So I can keep going to my yoga?
You can keep going to anything. You don't have to give anything up for this. Okay. Truly. You don't have to come to the conclusion that everything else is wrong and this is right. You don't even have to believe that this is right. All you have to do is take the medicine. That's it. And you tell me, get back to me at some time in the future and let me know if it's not the case that you keep looking. Despite
well,
the
how would I
anxiety.
really know? I mean,
Well, because it actually is an act.
Because of that anxiety. If I get that anxiety
No, because
again,
it actually is an act, and you'll
not...
recognize it when it appears. It's an act. It's not some magical, mystical tour. It's an actual human act, and that's the reason that I went through the whole thing about watching your breath and then getting a sense of the feel of your tongue and all of that.
You gave me all this sense of comfort, and then you tore it out from underneath me.
That's right. And,
at least that's how it felt to me. Sorry.
That was not exactly my intent, but but it's not a bad thing. My intent was to, and everybody should hear this, my intent was to acquaint you in the moment of our discussion of it with what I am talking about when I talk about looking.
Well, the ability to focus your attention, and that's what I've been learning for the last 5 years. You know?
Right.
But if you're taking your attention off of all these things out in your life that are your misery and putting it on this table, that's going to calm me down.
Yes,
everybody
that's right.
for years has told me, you
that's
take
right.
10 deep breaths and you're going to settle down. And
that's
you do,
right.
because your focus is somewhere else,
That's right. You'll settle down. I mean, really. And if you have a headache and you take an aspirin, your headache will go away. Right?
Yeah.
But if you have a brain tumor and you take an aspirin and your headache go away, it ain't going to make the brain tumor go away.
Yeah.
So let me finish what I was saying. The reason I did that way was because I really see from my own experience that the idea that we actually can choose where to put our attention is not so obvious to everybody. Really isn't so obvious to everybody. It seems like attention gets called by things. And most of the time it does, which is why I want to make it very plain by you having the experience of it in the time that we were talking about it, that you actually do have that capacity to choose where you're going to put your attention. And then put it here, on you, or on me, as I think is a better way for you to
Can I just put my
say it.
attention on you? It's easier. I can look at you and have my mind on something,
Yeah. Well, this you'll see.
Okay.
You're going to be fine. Really.
Thank you.
It's obvious.
And thanks, Carla, for the microphone off camera. I appreciate it. Do you still want me to sign your thing? No.
Anybody else want to say something before I get started? Eileen?
I'm here.
Eileen, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm getting good, aren't I?
This is really quick. I don't want to deprive anyone of
It's all right. You
healthy
can't.
anxiety, but something you said years ago was really helpful to me. It may not be language you use now, but it was, someone said, how do you get started? And you said, you can ask how can I get a look at myself? I've used it. I found it really helpful.
Okay. Anybody else? Rose, did you have something?
I'll wait till later.
Okay. And what I want to talk about is something similar to what Eva was talking about. How this works. I mean, really, how does it work? I mean, we go into spiritual teachings and ancient wisdom teachings and so forth, and these things work because of mysterious forces that we tap into and that clear things up and settle everything for us. We don't have to worry about how they work. In fact, it's none of our business how they work. All we have to do is do what we're told, and if we're lucky, the end will be us being free of any discontent with our lives whatsoever. But this isn't like that. This thing actually, I have some ideas, and I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not actually qualified to do much of anything except think about these things, and thinking about these things, which by the way is an ordinary human activity that's quite pleasant and not something that needs to be dispensed with and done away with, just for the record. Some of this, of course, I've said, and if anybody wants to interrupt me, raise your hand and I'll find a way to stop and talk to you. Here's the thing. The way we live our lives is through the psychological mechanisms with which we relate to life and its characteristics. It's the things that come and go within us, the sensations, the emotional experiences, the thoughts, the beliefs, the understandings, the things we like, the things we don't like, the things we know, the things we don't know. These things are all mediated by psychological apparatus, by a number of psychological mechanisms that permit us to be able to access these sensations and experiences, and then give us access to other psychological mechanisms that help us understand what they are and relate to them in an appropriate manner, and so forth and so on. Those psychological mechanisms we're not born with. They are things that come into being, and they change over time, and they become more or less adept at what they're intended to do, and they become distorted and clarified, and go through a lot of changes throughout the course of our life. New ones appear, old ones disappear, and like that. But that's that apparatus of psychological mechanisms. That apparatus is our face. It's our personality. And it's always changing. It's always moving, always in flux, depending on what it is relating to and what's coming in and going out of it. For most people, and maybe even for all people, for all human beings, it is the case that whole apparatus of psychological mechanism and personality is rooted in underlying anxiety about life itself, an underlying sense that there's something wrong that needs to be corrected, and if there's not something wrong right now that needs to be corrected, there's very likely to be something wrong show up soon, so I've got to keep an eye out to make sure that I notice it when it comes in, and so forth. It also tries to help identify to us where because the other part of the unsatisfactoriness of human life is the fact that it seems to hold such great promise. I mean, we're told it holds such great promise. And our own experience of life as a human being kind of confirms that. It feels like being alive as a human being should produce some profound satisfaction and fulfillment. It feels like it ought to produce that, but it doesn't. So the other thing we do with these mechanisms to look out for is to look out for something that might appear that holds out hope that it might be the thing that provides us with the fulfillment and satisfaction that we are told and that everybody seems to believe should be the experience of life as a human being. Fulfillment, satisfaction, clarity, clear seeing, all that, right? So our personalities are the psychological mechanisms with which we relate to existence itself, are founded because of the quirk of the way in which human beings have such a vivid sense of self-consciousness. I believe it's directly tied to that. We are so clear about the fact that we are something that clarity and the strength of that certainty, coupled with the fear of life that appears through no fault of our own. It has nothing to do with a lack of understanding of things. It just appears and again, it can appear, different people have different opinions about when or why it appears, but the fact of its existence is certain. There is an underlying background layer of kind of anxiety that we don't always pay attention to, that most of the time just runs as a kind of murmur in the background of everything, and sometimes flares up depending on circumstantial arisings and so forth. But it's that background layer of anxiety that forms the foundation for the entire psychological mechanism, for the entire personality. The entire personality is rooted in and founded on the assumption of there's some reason to be anxious here. There's some reason to be watchful and careful and hopeful and all the other things, all the other kind of human things psychological things that we are so fond of. So we have a lot over the years. We have acquired it being the case that it is actually the common experience of humanity that there's something wrong, that we don't know what it is, and there's something to get that we don't know what it is either. That being the common experience of humanity, there has appeared within humanity over the years a huge range of suggestions as to what to do about that underlying base anxiety that kind of skews everything and makes us never satisfied. Never satisfied. And these things have taken the form of philosophy, psychology, yoga, and I'm speaking about the kind of hatha yoga and things of that, and body yoga, right? Wisdom teachings, religions, psychotherapy, sex, drugs, rock and roll, wealth, physical wealth. Pretty much everything that human beings do anymore is done in order to resolve that background of anxiety upon which our entire experience of life rests, to distract us from it, to find a therapeutic way to replace it with calm and ease of being, which is always temporary, to find therapeutic measures to identify the particular ways in which particular psychological mechanisms are skewed and out of balance and off-center, and then try to correct those particular psychological mechanisms through psychotherapy or drug therapy or a whole range of things like that. And in many cases, it is actually effective with two limitations. One is it can be actually effective for the particular psychological mechanism, for example. Psychotherapy of one sort or another can actually be effective in ameliorating and mitigating deep psychological traumas and quirks and things of that nature, so that particular psychological disorders can be corrected, but it still remains the baseline of anxiety, and what happens is that we become able to live like most human beings do, ignoring that baseline of anxiety. Just the most commonplace, the most universal, and the most effective tactic for dealing with this anxiety is denial. And that's what most of us kind of resort to in the end. Similarly, the spiritual teachings, because the spiritual teachings, the ancient wisdom teachings, are utterances from human beings who have stumbled upon the natural state of being a human being. And sometimes they understand what happened, sometimes they don't understand what happened, because what they are speaking through, although there is a school of thought that would think that there's a state of enlightenment that takes them outside of the experience of human consciousness, but I don't think that's true. I think that all of them speak through the same psychological mechanisms as the rest of us speak through. They understand what happened to them on the basis of the same psychological mechanisms that the rest of us understand what happens to us. And I think that until now, that there has not been the combination of seeing through to the actual cause of the problem and the solution to the problem, and the widespread ability to talk about it among a whole bunch of human beings. You know, the Buddha walked the roads of India on foot for 40 years. And how many people could he have spoken to? Not many, really. If I had to walk on foot trying to find, and there were less people then too. There weren't a bunch of crowds to run into. So, what I think about the ancient wisdom teachings also is that they resonate very deeply with our unconscious sense of what is the case, but they provide us with no help and they can provide us with some comfort and some relief and some respite and some hope even, although mostly they anathematize hope. But they provide us with hope. But they, like the psychotherapies, they deal with moments of existence and passing states. You know, sex, drugs, and rock and roll can distract us from the anxiety too, and many people resort to that therapeutic means, and driven by the same thing, by the same anxiety, trying to either distract myself from it or to sedate it so I don't feel it anymore. So we've been going along, and I know that human beings have been around for Homo sapiens probably for 80, 100,000 years. But really, the human beings as we are today, 80,000 years ago, human beings were barely able to survive, barely able to keep from being food, and they probably lived for 20 years if they were lucky. So that the possibility of even being aware of this underlying anxiety was unlikely to appear in them. But in the last 5,000 years, things have been different. So, all of these things, all of the things that we have tried to do for 5,000 years or more, all of these things have the capacity to provide some either temporary or incomplete respite, relief from the underlying sense that there's something wrong with my life. They either are able to provide therapeutic action that actually fixes really serious disturbances in a psychological mechanism, as in psychotherapy and pharmacology and all of that stuff, and they're able to provide us with moments of respite. The movies, that everything. But still, we've got 7 billion people on the planet, and almost without exception, when you're talking about a number that large, almost without exception, every human being in that 7 billion human beings is is afflicted with this anxiety and afflicted with the inability of all of the means that we have come up with so far to put a final end to it, so I can live my life and love my life. Yes. What's your name?
David.
David.
I think for what I'm feeling now, it's helpful to a point to see the point that you're making now, and you were talking about yesterday as well, about why we're having the conversation we're having here, and why we're not continuing in the old conversation. And I guess I just feel like this deserves a new conversation,
Well, let's start the new conversation.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
I agree with you.
I have a thought actually to start
Okay.
that. When you first spoke the words "the fear of life," it was maybe a year ago or so, and I knew what you were talking about. And I know what you mean by the field of anxiety. I think that's very, very easy to point out. What if that fear of life what if it's a misperception, not about the nature of life or the world, but about that which it's talking about? What if the misperception is about me?
Oh, it is. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Fundamentally.
Because you take any given fear of life, any given idea of that anxiety, if it could speak, anything it could say, those things do happen out in life. They do happen out in the world. It's almost as if that's a valid. I just feel like there's a function in our minds or whatever, to protect us, to keep us safe.
Oh, there is.
And,
yes, that's healthy.
And the things that it's worried about and trying to protect us from are all quite valid. And the thing about this work is it's bringing attention for the first time to that which the fear is talking about, right?
Right.
And I think for me, the power of this work is that when I see that, somehow it sort of dawns in me that I don't need to be afraid, because this that I am, it hasn't been hurt or changed. and it's like a very visceral kind of revelation, it feels like, even though it can be very subtle. But it's like the job of this mind, the job of the self-preservation instinct. It finally sees that that its job really isn't that hard, you know, and it doesn't have to be on overtime all the time, you know. And I've been noticing, as certainly the grip of the fear, the sort of the contamination of the fear has definitely gone to a huge extent. But the same kind of things, the same kind of ideas are still there.
Yes.
And they're valid. Like, I don't have a problem with the ideas of the fear. You know?
That's right.
But it's not anything like it was.
That's right.
And the only difference is that now I have recognized what I am.
But that's where I
looking at
stop
it.
you. And that's an understandable thing to think. But it's not the case. The recognition of the inherent safety and satisfaction that is present in human life, with all of the uncertainty, with all of the ignorance, with all of the craziness and so forth of the events and responses that occur within a human life. The recognition is an effect of the looking. It's not that the recognition is what has taken from you the idea that these things are wrong and they have to be corrected. You know, the way in which life unfolds and reveals itself and expresses itself and so forth. It's not that the recognition that these things don't need to be corrected and that I am not at risk because of the unpredictability, uncertainty, and so forth that with which life expresses. It's not the recognition that has revealed that to you. It is like you report that the fear is gone, the anxiety is gone, the snuffing out of the fear of life allows that psychological insight to appear. It's not that the psychological insight is the cause of a new relationship with life. It's part of the whole way in which the snuffing out of the cause of the problem allows us to see life more clearly and more sanely.
The thing that it feels to me, I don't feel like I've had a new revelation about life.
No, you haven't.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying.
About the nature of life.
No,
either.
that's not what I'm saying.
But it does feel, I do feel, as if directly from looking at myself, I have a new sense of the nature of myself.
Yes, yes, except that's true too. But that's not.
See, if I didn't look, I mean, when I look at myself now, and I've gotten familiar with that. It's not hard for me to taste that.
It's easy, yeah.
And when I am looking at that, it's very clear to my body, to my mind, to all the array of psychological things. Mm. It's clear that, wow, I feel well. I feel the same as I always have. And I just know I've had so many ups and downs. And when I see this and it's the same, all of me knows that something about life then, and something about myself, it's like, wow, I'm the same. And to me, it does seem like it's a recognition of about myself, my actual nature, you know.
I'm aware that it seems that way, and what I'm suggesting is that opinion will pass. It's the one of the things that has...
Why does it need to pass?
Well, it doesn't need to pass, except that it does. But the reason that I would contend with it at all is because we have, for all of the time that we've been working to try to solve this problem of being a human being, we have depended upon precisely the idea that something needs to change in the psychological apparatus in order that, and that when that change occurs, then I'll see things clearly. So that our attention has been on the psychological apparatus itself. And there's a kind of addiction to the belief that that's where the problem resides. And what I say is that there's nothing whatsoever about the psychological quirks and misunderstandings and so forth that constitute the problem. They are reactions to the problem. The problem is the anxiety. And that when the anxiety goes, those psychological mechanisms change and new insights appear freshly, trying to see clearly what has happened, because something has happened. But what has actually happened is nothing as complicated as that. The psychology, your psychology, the way in which your mind operates and relates to existence and so forth and so on, will continue to change, and it'll continue to reform itself in a fresh personality that is different from the old. The reason that that's happening is because the circumstances are what form those things, and the circumstances now, something is gone. It's not something new that has appeared. The something new that has appeared is quite welcome, but it's not the new thing that has appeared that has caused the change. It is the absence of the fear of life that has provided the possibility for these new insights to appear.
Yeah, I don't really hear the contention with what you said and what I was saying. Maybe I'm. I think maybe it sounds like what I've been saying so far. It sounds like there's like a new recognition about me being the same always, and that's what did the change.
Right, that's what I hear you saying.
And I guess I'm just saying, like, I'm wondering about how it works, I suppose.
That's what I'm trying to say this morning, how it works.
And I mean, it does feel to me that if I were to put it into words, I do think it's happening all kind of organically. It's happening all
it is happening
very naturally.
Totally naturally.
Not through an insight. This is, I mean, I'm trying to express in like an insight form.
Right.
But it...
You're doing fine, really. I mean, there's nothing about the fact, like the fact that you see things differently than me, right? Even if you do, which maybe you don't, because what you just said is actually what I do hear you saying, that it's the insight that has produced the change. And that's just simply not the case.
I see. It's not though. That's not what I feel.
Okay, that's good.
I feel like, I mean, there was no insight for a long time. And I do agree with the way you speak of it. I don't have a contention with the way you speak of it. I'm just trying to maybe add something new to the table, and you can shoot it down if you like.
I'm really happy you have. I mean, really, this is exactly the kind of conversation that we need to have. This is exactly what I'm looking for, is this kind of conversation.
So, definitely through the looking, it did its work, and there was no new insight about, wow, I'm always the same, and so I'm no longer afraid. That would be like a thought and then a decision not to be afraid anymore.
Right.
So I don't know. It does feel like it's perfectly. I guess the reason why it may be important for me to recognize that, like, this is why I don't feel afraid anymore. Maybe it helps. It does help for me to have a sense like, okay, I'm looking at what's always the same. I'm looking at what's always here. And there is a feeling tone to that. And the feeling
Yes,
tone,
there is a feeling tone.
and if
to
I were
it.
to say
It's
what
very
the feeling,
subtle, but yeah.
if the feeling tone, if I could say what the feeling tone is, when I really recognize it and am feeling it, it's a feeling of well-being.
Yes.
And I understand, like, we can't change the target so that we're looking for well-being. But I don't know. It seems like it may be helpful in looking. I'm not sure in what way. Maybe just like I guess where I'm right now, like, and I look at myself and I feel a feeling of well-being, and at some point in my day, if I am caught up in something, I look at myself as a feeling of well-being, and actually many other qualities, like nice qualities, and it's doing some work of bringing me out of the fear even more.
Maybe, maybe not. But what it might be, and just reflect on this over a little bit of time, and what it might be is there's a lingering allegiance to a kind of love affair with the personality, or a love affair with the mind, a lingering allegiance to the idea that the mind itself is an alive, sentient organism that has some inherent ontological meaning and significance. And what I am saying, and what I think is much more helpful to people who are caught in the grip of the belief in the mind's power and so forth, and significance and so forth, it's much more helpful to see that actually the mind itself, with all of its apparati, and quirks and beauty and terror and all that stuff, the mind itself is very mechanical. It is a contraption that comes into being in accordance with the laws of cause and effect, all of its parts, and if that's seen, and it doesn't have to be like that. Seeing that isn't going to end the fear, but that is what will be seen before it's over with, is that the mind and all of its doings is a mechanical apparatus ruled by the laws of cause and effect, and not a place to find respite or solution to life.
I will reflect on that.
Okay.
But right away, I mean, I don't feel that that's what's happening with me.
That's what I'm saying.
I feel
know
like
you don't.
you speak of self-consciousness as a great facility and a great tool. And
Self-consciousness isn't exactly a tool.
Well,
it's a characteristic of human consciousness that is that may or may not be. I believe that it is uniquely vivid and vibrant in the human creature in a way that is qualitatively different from other sentient creatures.
and the mind would be in the same way, like
No,
like
the mind is not that.
Well, what is it that's using this conversation, that's evolving this conversation?
The mind is.
So that's what I'm
In
doing,
accordance with the laws of cause and effect.
and that's what I'm trying to do. Is use that mind not as like a romance
Right.
or something, but this is
Right. And this is the way. This is what happens in life, is that the mind then becomes a skillful instrument to examine things and to make decisions and so forth and so on. The mind becomes what its natural role is, an instrument of human consciousness that is skillful and not afflicted with all of the quirks and misunderstandings and so forth that the fear of life has caused in it. It changes. The mind changes and becomes an instrument, skillful and supple and intelligent.
So this is a thought just about. It feels really important to me to engage, to be here for one thing, and to talk with you even if I'm not sure what to say. But to me, it seems very, very important the way that this act, and now it has clearly been stripped down to something very, very essential and very powerful and very important. And still, it seems to me that the way that that's packaged, the conversation that goes on around that, as long as it's always giving primacy to the act, the conversation is very important. You know?
Oh, I think so too. That's what I'm saying.
And it feels like we've definitely covered the bases of, how we've gotten here. And I don't know, I would like to talk about why does it work? Why does it work? Why is it so powerful?
That's what I'm going to talk about this morning. That's
Okay.
exactly what I started. I have to start, I have to put it in context before I start to that.
So
How
I
it works.
just interrupted you, I guess.
It's okay. It's
But-
we've had a good conversation, and really, I'm totally in agreement with you that this is exactly the kind of conversation that needs to take place in humanity in general, and it's the kind of conversation I actually kind of yearn for. So don't feel that I'm.
I don't. Yeah, it's all good. Just to take it back to that very first thought, I'll just say that once more, and then you can respond and do your own thing, or But to me, it seems like why this is so powerful and why it works is because the fear is about me, about my nature, about my being hurt, being harmed, being embarrassed, being left behind, being any number of things. And when I look at myself, I am seeing something. Maybe I don't realize it for a long time, but I'm seeing something which actually doesn't need protection.
That's right.
It actually doesn't ever feel embarrassed. It doesn't ever feel fear itself. It
Doesn't feel much of anything at all.
Exactly. And the rest of me might say, "Oh, that's well-being,
Right.
or safety, or security." So,
Right. And prior to the looking, the rest of you might have said, "Wow, that's nothing. That's not worth even looking at." But let me try to explain to you and to everybody else how I think it works, because there's a difference, and it's not that I think that. Like I really, really understand exactly what you're saying, and I really understand the appeal of it and the beauty of it, actually, the depth of it. But there's two reasons that I don't speak about it in those terms, and one reason is because I don't see it actually be the case. I actually think that that's upside down. And the second reason is because I think that it tends to be misleading to people, and that we all have a really deep, abiding allegiance to the idea that our thoughts and our understandings of things and our relationship with things and so forth is the problem or the solution. So that's why I do that. But mostly it's because I don't see that that's actually how the recovery works. Firstly, as I said, it seems to me that the entire mind is a mechanical device over which we have no say. We don't say, "I am going to think good thoughts." Well, we might say that, and we might even be able to get a book of good thoughts to think, right? But we don't say, "Oh, the problem here is that I have a misunderstanding of my actual relationship with life, and the actual the actual effect that life has on me. We don't say that. Well, we do say that, but that doesn't lead us anywhere. The opinion that it is my understanding of things that causes the problem has had no good effect at all. And that's the opinion that most of the ancient wisdom teachings and psychology and philosophy and a whole range of things rest upon. That it's my understanding of things that constitutes the problem and creates the problem by false understanding. That's the flip side of the idea that my true understanding is what has seen through it and given me peace and so forth. But I'm probably misinterpreting you, but that's okay. There are those who do think that.
I don't think I was saying that changing my understanding did anything. What I was trying to do is just, in terms of our conversation.
Okay, it's okay.
It's not like I'm saying we need to get understanding.
Right, I know. It's just, but that's just kind of a natural inference that can be drawn from that.
Well, what if we always say in this conversation, and we get very clear on it, it's all about the act, and this conversation is like a constantly evolving thing.
Yes, and we are. That's exactly my point. That's exactly what I say. It's the act. The conversation is about the act and its effects and so forth, and therefore it's moving things forward.
I guess how you reacted, it almost makes it a little harder to bring something new to the table, because it'll be seen as understanding in the mind.
But then, don't you see that that's part of the conversation? I mean,
it feels like it's saying, don't try to have new understanding, and don't try to express new insight.
Well, but that's not what I'm saying.
Okay, it's kind of coming across that way.
But that's not what I'm saying. And maybe it'll clarify as I continue to try to explain what I think happens as a result of the looking. First of all, again, just to kind of sum up what I was saying earlier, the experience of dissatisfaction, the fearfulness, the particular instances of fearfulness and distrust of life, the negative things that I do, the reactive behaviors that are habituated in me, the things that I react negatively to, the things that I react to, my reactions to things and the fact that sometimes they're negative, sometimes they're positive, sometimes they're indifferent. The way in which I have come to an adequate internal picture of what I am and how I am in life and how life is and so forth. That whole apparatus, to my point of view, is mechanical. And it is, however, like many mechanical things, it is rich and deep and full of substance and density and so forth and so on, and that is a state of affairs that is quite that clearly can be produced by mechanical processes, and we can go to IMAX or something. That state of affairs, the state of affairs of a feeling of density and significance and so forth, and in the picture of my picture of what my life is and what my relationship to life and to everybody else is, what I contend is that whole apparatus is mechanical. It's made up of mechanical, and of course understand that we are in an infinitely complex system here, which is the system of existence. Infinitely complex, infinitely vast and minuscule at the same time. Existence. So that in this ocean of existence, these mechanical processes arrive in a normal cause and effect manner. I am founded in a sense that life is out to get me. That is the prime proximate cause that skews everything else. All the other cause and effect forces that are taking place take place in an apparatus that has first been conditioned by the sense that life is out to get me. Still mechanical. That sense that life is out to get me is not something that I concluded from some examination, no matter how, silly that examination might be. That anxiety and that fear of life is something that came upon me from outside of me, having nothing whatsoever to do with anything I thought or believed or wanted or didn't want about anything at all. So the fear of life is not a matter of the fear of life is not our understanding of life. It's an artifact that has appeared in this ocean of existence that we had nothing to do with. So that everything about God knows the human mind is magnificent in its reach and its depth and its ability to hold contradictory ideas and all kinds of things that you wouldn't expect in a mechanical apparatus. But it is mechanical. It is cause and effect that causes me, for example, to conclude that pretty people are good and I like being around them. That people that speak softly are not a threat to me. That people who speak harshly are a threat to me. It is that if I poke my finger in my eye, I'm going to hurt. It's going to hurt me. These things are all mechanical understandings. They have appeared in a mechanical way in consistent with the laws of cause and effect. And it's just an extremely complex system that we're in here. So it's difficult to see the mechanical nature of these things until you actually do. And then it's obvious. It's not, it's I don't know what it's like. So, I've got to get through this, okay? So here's what I think happens. And this seems to me to be the case. The proximate cause of all the trouble has nothing whatsoever to do with my understandings or misunderstandings, with my right actions or wrong actions, with my sinfulness or what's the opposite of sinfulness?
Purity. Virtue. Purity.
Virtue, yeah. Has nothing whatsoever to do with fate or anything at all. It has nothing to do with any thought that's in my mind. The thoughts that are in my mind are caused by the ocean of cause and effect. And in this mind is founded, not this mind, but used to be, founded on a bed of anxiety and fearfulness. So the thoughts that are in my mind, oh, life sucks, that's not anything but a mechanical appearance based on the laws of cause and effect operating within this particular mind stream. Okay. Now, we look at this reality of what it feels like to be me. This feeling tone. It is a feeling tone. And we do it for whatever reason, because we get tricked into it, or because we're smart enough to do it, or whatever. And that looking then, it can stir up anxiety in the beginning, right? That's part of what happens. But that looking, what that does is, much as you said, it just snuffs out the fear of life. And much as you said, like I say that when I talk about how that happens, I talk about it in a way that, like I say that I really don't know in detail where I can explicate the actual thing that occurs in the moment of that contact between the beam of attention and the reality of my nature, any more than I can explicate in exquisite detail what happens when I put a burning match in water. But in a similar fashion, when that beam of attention touches the reality of my nature, and I suspect it is, as you say, because it's due to, although that doesn't explicate the mechanism of it, it's due to the fact that it is self-evident that I can't be harmed by life. I've been harmed by nothing. So whatever the way in which that mechanism plays out, that too is a mechanism of cause and effect. I have brought my attention to a point which snuffs out that underlying anxiety. That's what happens. It may not be apparent that that's what's happened for a while, but that's what happens. Sometimes we get anxious about the fact that we're snuffing out the underlying anxiety, lest we're going to get caught with, by surprise. Now the whole game has changed. The foundation has been taken away. The rug has been pulled out of the whole business of the conglomeration of thought and understanding and reactive behaviors and relationships and so forth and so on. That it rested on has been pulled out from under it. So what kicks in now is a new cycle in this business of cause and effect development of the characteristics of the mind. And whereas before, the mind mostly consisted in a whole universe of means whereby I could either deny that something was wrong or find some good feeling that would convince me that it was okay if I could just get this good feeling, or find some understanding that might ease my difficulty with relating to my own life, or find some yoga practice that gives me respite, a place to go to get some peace and so forth, or all the other things that we do, or find somebody to kill because somebody is if I get rid of that character there, that'll be the end of my problems. That whole apparatus now has no basis. It's all wobbly, like a drunk trying to get home on foot. And what happens over time is that those negative mechanisms disappear. They just disappear. And I'm going to give you an example of what I'm talking about, and then I'm going to go on a little bit more. And this is a really good example, and in fact, it's only recently that I saw it in its true light, which is an indication, and what I want you to see is that the restructuring of this apparatus probably is never finished, probably never done. It's not something that happens and then it's over. It's life, for God's sake. It's never done. In 2006, and I've told this story before, but I missed the point the last times I've told it. In 2006, I weighed 240 pounds and had been smoking Camel non-filter cigarettes for 50 years. and never had a break in him at all. And weighed 240 pounds, I also would like to say. I guess I could sell this as a diet, a weight loss program.
Get yourself diet.
And, you know, the weight loss doesn't have anything to do with the point I'm going to make. It does, but it's a little more complicated than this. I smoke Camel non-filter cigarettes, except when I smoke Pall Malls. I smoked non-filter cigarettes for 50 years. And in 2006, and I still smoked after Carl and I got married, and I then was, you know, I had to go outside, and I was one of those folks that, you know, the pariahs, today's pariahs, the smokers who have to get away from social people to do their dirty deed. So, and I smoked, and I would go outside, and I'd have a cigarette from time to time, and I would always be aware of, you know, to make sure that I arranged for opportunities to have a cigarette when we were on the road or, you know, doing something. I wanted to be always, you know, aware of the fact that I was going to have a smoke at some time during this adventure. And I had a routine, a kind of habitual routine, where before it was time to go to bed, I'd go out on the back porch and have a cigarette, then I'd come in and get a shower and get all the stench off of me and so forth, and go to bed. And one night I was standing out in the back porch when we lived on El Camino, and in the dark, and I was smoking a cigarette, and the other thing that accompanied this all along was another psychological mechanism working in the background that says, man, what is up with you? Why do you keep doing this? Why don't you stop doing this? You're a bad person. You're a bad person for doing this. And you're going to go to hell. I mean, it wasn't literal in that way, but that was the feeling of it. Guilt. Disgust. This was 2006. You know, this is quite a ways along in the process of recovery from the fear of life. I was standing out there smoking a cigarette, and the usual sense of, you know, guilt and self-disgust and things like that arose, which they didn't bother me too much. I saw them for what they were, and it was okay. And then the usual response was this. Well, yes, it's right. It's a really stupid thing to do. It might kill me, and it's not very smart, and yada, 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 but it's probably too late. I mean, how old was I? 2006, 60-something? 64 years old, and I've been smoking all these years. If I quit now, it's probably too late anyway, so why deprive myself of, you know, this little bit of satisfaction that I get? It's a satisfaction, of course, that's predicated on the dissatisfaction that comes from the craving for nicotine, right? But still, it's satisfaction. That's what I'm saying about what we do in our lives. We seek some satisfaction, even if it requires us to create dissatisfaction in order to have it. So and that thought came up, and that used to happen. There's a psychological term for it, but I don't remember what it was, but a recurring pattern of smoking, guilt, and then the response, like a Greek chorus. And the response always was the same. Well, yes, all that's right, but, you know, it's probably too late. You've been smoking, you're 64 years old. Whatever's happened is already happened, and so why bother? And then there came a new thing that appeared in that little recitative going on, which was, well, you know what? It might be too late, but it sure isn't too early. And and I quit smoking. Really. Now, I used to tell that story every once in a while, just as the way I did it just now is, but the thing to see in the context that we're speaking now is that whole local mechanism that was connected with smoking cigarettes, that whole thing is a mechanism that came into being in compliance with the laws of cause and effect and persisted for a very, very long time. Always the same, always repetitious, the same thing again and again. But it wasn't like my understanding of things. My understanding of things saw that clearly to be just stupid. But still, it was there all the time. Nothing got rid of it. Nothing did anything about it until it was its time. And then a new mechanical arising appeared to explain what was happening that said, yes, but it's never too early. It's certainly not too early. Both the mechanism that was associated with my smoking cigarettes and the mechanism that was associated with the end of my smoking cigarettes were mechanical arisings that came into being because of the circumstances that were present at the time, because of what was happening at the time. And what was happening at the time that I quit was that whatever that whole cluster, the whole smoking cluster, disappeared. It just disappeared and then had to be explained by something that would let me know that it was my own wonderful insight that had brought an end to it. And I used to get kind of pleasure out of that. There was an insight that came to me, and that's what killed off the smoking. But that's just not the case. It's just not true. And this is many years into the looking, many years in the absence of that underlying anxiety. So it is experiences like that have convinced, and other people's reports that have convinced me that all of these things that we see either to be the cause of our trouble, these mental things that we see to be the cause of our trouble, and the mental things that we see to be what will solve our trouble, they're all mechanical arisings that are caused by God knows what forces, whatever is going on, by the whole ocean of cause and effect, by this whole way in which personality arises and takes shape, takes form. So that's the way it happens. That is the way it happens. Things disappear. Now, when we are in the early stages of recovery from the fear, there is such a mass of material that is suddenly rendered useless and beside the point that things can get quite confusing and complicated and can get quite uncomfortable and painful, because the whole personality has pretty much all of the features that comprise my personality that were connected with my relationship with life. That's it. All the features of my personality that were connected with the relationship with life were rendered beside the point and wrong and of no consequence. They weren't the problem. The problem was the fear of life. And those mechanisms remained until they don't anymore, which, maybe I don't have any more. But I doubt it. So what I'm trying to get at here is, and I'm going to try to say it one more time, what I'm trying to get at here is that the disease and the cure are entirely mechanical, and that what it produces in us is the replacement of a mental apparatus that was formed for the purpose of protecting us from life itself into a mental apparatus that serves the purpose that actually is consistent with the nature of human existence. It is replaced by a mental apparatus that is fueled by satisfaction, and becoming free of neurotic behaviors and neurotic habits of reaction, neurotic habits of relationship, and so forth, and becoming free of the sense of a distance between me and my life, and those psychological characteristics take on a new shape, a shape that uses intelligence and is not fearful, and that is capable of navigating life in a way that's intelligent and sane and isn't predicated on the idea that life is out to get me and that life is the problem that I need to solve. And of course, the course of that can be difficult and rocky and confusing and complicated and painful. But the end is certain. And the end is the sweetness of the human mind. You know, the sweetness of it. It's a very sweet thing, the human mind. It is deep and rich and complicated, but mechanical. You're not mechanical. What did you want? What do you want to say, Eva? And I only go through all this because I really would like, as I said, you know, from my point of view, it doesn't matter whether I ever say anything about this or not. The end is going to come anyway. But I really would like to provide people with some psychological understanding. This is the understanding that helps. Some psychological understanding that puts what's happening in the course of the recovery into the proper context so that it doesn't cause unnecessary confusion.
So you get me talking and maybe now you can't shut me up.
I'm so bad.
You know, I have no doubt that Rick has looked inside himself. You know, he's been doing this sort of thing for a number of years. And I think a couple of the people who have spoken have as well. But Rick still feels pretty miserable, you know, years later. And so what I used to say to him, or before coming here, my thought was, you're on a road and I'm on a road towards the same goal, and eventually we'll both get there. Your road might be straight and mine might be curvy, whatever, you know. But now in listening to this and trying to, you know, make some sense out of what you're telling me, it sounds as though maybe the act is a tool and maybe it's a straightforward tool. But if it's going to take me years for it to get me to that, then maybe, you know, these other things that
you should keep doing these other things.
Might provide me some comfort.
Don't you
along
understand
the way.
that I don't want you to stop doing anything?
Right.
I really don't.
But it's worthless, right? Because it's not going to get me there.
No, it's not worthless if it gives you pleasure.
Okay.
If it gives you some comfort. If you know, it's not worthless at all.
But yoga is just as good as murdering somebody that gives somebody comfort, or doing drugs, or doing...
No, yoga is not just as good as murdering somebody. Murdering somebody gives no one comfort.
Well...
It doesn't give the murderer comfort. The murderer thinks they're going to get comfort from it.
Right.
Yoga does give you comfort.
Okay.
So, and even if you were a murderer, I wouldn't tell you to stop. I may tell you to stop. You know, but it's not the being of a murderer that's the problem. It's the problem to the murderee, but it's not the being of the murderer
Okay.
that is the problem. The problem is what has given rise to such an insane response to life itself. And it's not the fact that, so the being of a murderer is just the end result of it. That's not the problem. We can do with that by murdering the murderer. So I'm not asking you to stop anything. This isn't something you have to abandon everything else for.
Right.
What is healthy, intelligent, and sane about your psychology will remain and be enhanced. What is unhealthy, insane, and harmful about your psychology will pass away.
But I've heard you say, like, put down my book, put down the religious books.
Just
But
while
he
you're
can
here
keep
with me.
his pot.
Just while
I
you're
don't
here with me.
understand. I'm confused.
No, I don't say put them down forever. I say
Okay.
for this time, just here, put them down.
Okay.
And sometimes I'll tell people, just for a while, put the books down.
Okay.
Just for a while. When I sense that there's a real weight that's hanging over them that has to do with reading spiritual books and so forth.
Do you sense that there's a real weight over me with doing my yoga and my other
No,
stuff?
I don't.
Okay.
Why would you think I think that?
I don't know, because I'm pretty attached to
Hey,
it.
let me tell you, I'm not at all bashful about saying what I think.
Okay. All right.
No, and this is good because people need to understand this too. This is not something that is, there's nothing to it but the act. There's no understanding that's needed. There's no understanding that has to be abandoned. There's no belief that's needed. There's no belief that needs to be abandoned. Really. This has nothing to do with that whole realm. The act is all there is to it. And it takes a tenth of a second. So when I speak about what's happening and why, the only reason I speak about the ancient wisdom teachings at all is because there is such a strong inclination to hear what I'm saying as being another version of that.
Well,
And
it does
hearing
feel
it-
really similar.
And hearing as it, right, it does. And hearing it as another version of that will lead you astray. That's the only reason I speak about it at all. I have nothing against them. I have nothing against reading them. I have nothing against practicing them. I have nothing against anything at all. Murder, maybe. I'm not real fond of murder. And I'm not real fond of, greed and so forth. But
So would you say that my ancient wisdom teachings are another tool I can keep in my toolkit, helping me to mitigate this fear of life? As, religion is a tool they can keep in their toolkit, but really what we need to do is, continue doing this act, and that's what's going to bring us there eventually. But along the road, I don't want to be uncomfortable for the next 4 years or 5 years until it finally starts to,
how old are you now?
until I start, how old am I?
Yeah.
40.
And how many of those years have you been uncomfortable?
Well, once you know that you're uncomfortable, years ago, I didn't know I was uncomfortable. I just thought this is how it is, really.
Yeah.
Once you have a knowledge of that, then you just want to fix it. You want to fix it now.
That's right. That's right. Which is another way in which discomfort manifests.
Yeah. You get more uncomfortable as your awareness arises,
All right. So what I'm saying is that I'm not causing the discomfort, but what this little bit of discomfort that's coming from this, you will forget about it very quickly.
Okay.
And I'm not saying anything about the religious teachings or the ancient wisdom teachings. I'm not saying you should keep them or throw them away. What I'm saying is that they are entirely beside the point to what we're talking about here. That's all. They're just beside the point. They're not on point. That's all.
Okay.
I have no other opinion about them at all. Love them, leave them, it's all the same to me. Just look at you, at me. Just look. That can't hurt. Looking at you is self-evidently harmless.
Thanks.
And it doesn't take any time. You can do it in the time it takes you to turn the page on Yoga Vasishtha or any other spiritual tome. And just as you're turning the page, look. In the commercial while you're watching TV, look. In the checkout stand while you're waiting for the checker, look. In a traffic jam, look. It's all beside the point to the looking.
And that brings me to a thought that I had yesterday when we were talking, and I think it was you that was up talking about that, you'd start looking and then you'd leave it. And then you'd realize, oh, I've left it and things are getting more and more miserable and it feels like it's because I've left it. So then I pick your book back up again and I start reading and it makes me look again. And you said, well, stop picking up my book. And that confused me. I'm like, do you want us to look? Do you not want us to look?
I want you to look at you. I want you to look at you. I don't want you to look at my book.
Well,
I don't want you not to look at my book.
I haven't looked at your book yet, I have to admit, sorry.
Yeah, but I don't want either of those things. If I say, don't look at my book, it's because I think looking at my book is distracting you from you. If I say, don't eat an ice cream cone, it's because I think eating that ice cream cone is distracting you from looking at you. But I have, look at my book, don't look at my book. Read a book, don't read a book. If we stay in this relationship over a period of time, there may come a time when I suggest to you that you put it down for a while. I don't know that that'll happen because it doesn't happen with everybody, but that's possible. But it's not because I think the reading of spiritual books is harmful, just kind of a distraction and off the point. But it's the same with sitcoms. I don't have anything against sitcoms either. But in the case of sitcoms, you can look. Reading spiritual books, you can look. There's nothing whatsoever to prevent you from looking.
What I thought he was saying was that he was inspired to start looking again by reading your book.
Well, that's okay. If that inspires him to start looking again, then I'm happy that he read the book.
Okay.
You see, it's just beside the point. It's not like the book is a good thing or a book is a bad thing, right? It depends on the circumstances and the context of the moment. If picking up that book produced in him the desire to look again, then hallelujah. If putting it down produces in him the desire to look again, hallelujah to that. It's the looking. That's all.
And then I got confused when you said that we get obsessed with the looking, and then it's like taking antibiotics for too long and then it makes you sick.
I don't remember ever saying that. We can get obsessed with the looking, but I don't think it's going to make you sick.
Looking too much or continuing to just look and look and look and look and look and becoming, I thought you said obsessed with looking. I thought that's the word you used, but maybe it wasn't.
Fetishizing the looking.
Fetishizing the looking.
Fetishizing the looking. What I mean by that is turning the looking into a fetish, right? Like it's not really looking. It's rather something that is right for me to do and that somehow has some mystical power that if I don't do it, I'm going to be harmed, and if I do it, I might get well. That's just putting the looking in the same category as everything else. That's fetishizing the looking. If the looking is authentic, if you're actually looking and not merely, in this relationship with the looking, then the looking can't hurt you. But there's a tendency for us to fetishize everything. We find something, boy, right away we make that's it, that's the thing. But the looking isn't the thing. The looking is the act. You're the thing.
Okay.
Okay?
I think.
This is good. I'm really grateful to you for this. I'm grateful to you also for the same reason. This conversation is the conversation that I want to have.
Thanks.
Okay? Well, we got a couple minutes if anybody has anything else.
Sorry for taking all the time, you guys. Thank you.
Liz? Ten minutes.
Okay. You had said a couple of years ago, and I just want to check it out with you, whether you would still agree with this, that that everything is outward except for you.
Yes, I still agree with that.
So that's really helpful to me because whether I'm looking, quote, inward or outward, it's just looking outward. And so when I realize that, then what's left is me.
That's right. But you have to touch that. No,
Yeah, there's
enough.
this, you
that.
touch the sense of it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because that's all
That's
you
it.
can touch, because there's
That's it.
nothing,
That's it.
no thing to touch, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And then the other question, as you've been pointing out this morning, which is really interesting, is that the mind is, as we know, that the mind is an automatic apparatus. But although I know it, I don't really believe it. I mean,
Yes, I
you know, I don't
understand that,
operate.
yeah.
You know, I still believe the IMAX going on, right? And so there's really no way to really evaluate, I'm getting from this conversation, whether we're making, quote, progress or not. And it doesn't really matter. Just continue the act and let the chips fall where they may.
The way there is a way that you can tell that you're making progress, and we can talk about that some more this afternoon, but basically it has to do with the way in which your relationship with your own life is changing.
Okay.
Nothing is ever finished. This is not a quick fix, and nothing is ever finished.
Mm-hmm.
But life is never finished, really. So the way to monitor whether progress is being made has to do with looking at the relationship between you and your life. Okay?
Okay. Yeah.
And we'll talk about that some more this afternoon. That's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks.
Okay. I think we should just kind of call it a morning, don't you? Okay. This has been really wonderful. I'm really pleased, and I'm really grateful to the people who came up to talk. I like this idea a lot better. Now, it may be that the time will come, and because I kind of plan just to leave this like this, but it may be that as we progress, if I'm talking to you up there, I may say, no, let's come up here, and where I can get closer to you, and have less kind of distance between us. There's a different kind of relationship when we're side by side here, face to face, than there. There we have conversations that are extremely interesting and move the conversation forward for the whole community of people, not just those of us here. Here we have a much more personal, if you forgive the expression, a much more personal, direct experience of one another. And if I ask you to come up here, unless you have something hidden deep in your past that you don't want anybody to see you, which I personally would understand, I'd appreciate it if you'd come. Okay? Okay. But this is a much more organic and natural way now that it didn't used to be that the way we handled retreats and stuff was the way it had to be at that time. But clearly things have changed, and I like this a lot better. And I think we'll get better at it as we go along. Okay? Okay, thank you guys so much. And I will see you back here at 3 o'clock. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.